Hey everyone, welcome to Outside In with Anthony Koletsky. Thank you for joining. Today, I'm very excited to bring Todd Montgomery. He's the EVP of Customer Engagement and Support at Beachbody. Todd, thanks for joining.
Thanks, Anthony. Glad to be here.
Yeah, appreciate it. And so today, what we're going to be focusing on is how to teach a customer to be better, which will result in getting better service. So Todd, you came into Beachbody, and you transformed the way its operations work. I'd love to know, like, especially on a B2C side, were the first steps you took to transform Beachbody support service?
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to go into that. Thanks, Anthony. So I joined Beachbody about 5 years ago from American Express, and I joined a company that was in a high growth phase, which is very exciting, but provides a lot of challenges. And at the same time, we had kind of a transforming business model, one that's moving from DVDs to streaming and from an infomercial business to a network business. And so my first responsibility was to improve service, because it was really almost holding back the growth or the hesitation for people to do business with Beachbody based upon the kind of some of the challenges of navigating through the support team. And so first of all, I ended up doing a bunch of hiring. The good thing about a high growth company is lots of revenue is coming in, so they were open to expanding the investments. And in fact, when I started the company, the agreement I had in terms of how to manage expenses was as a percentage of revenue. So fortunately, on the upside, when things are growing, that provides you additional investment opportunity. And then on the downside, it's more challenging, but this was the good time. So I ended up doing a bunch of different hiring. We had a lot of our team here on site in LA, which is fairly expensive, and I had good experience offshore in both Philippines and India with American Express, doing some offshoring with some very strategic partners who really understand the value of customer service. So I ended up leveraging some of those relationships and some of the investment that I had in terms of being very explicit about my requirements and my expectations on how to deliver a superior customer experience from those vendors, and we're able to kind of strike up deals. And they're also very excited to get into an e-commerce company with high growth, et cetera. So I did that. I also ended up launching because there wasn't really a focus around customer satisfaction being measured by customers. So quickly, I launched Medallia, which is a customer experience tool out in the marketplace many of you are probably familiar with a 10-point scale, so I would know not only customer satisfaction, but also net promoter and how we're driving additional revenue through a better customer experience. So, and then invested in some basic tools around workforce management, QA, et cetera, just trying to get the basics together in terms of having the right number of people with the right tools or with the right measurement program.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. So kind of taking a step back here, you mentioned to transform Beachbody's customer support system, you had to bring in some offshore folks that you had previous experience with from Amex. So could you talk a little bit more about what you taught those vendors that resulted in them being good enough to be brought in for this project?
Sure. Yeah. So first of all, I think it's important to be very clear about the number one metric. In fact, we had hoodies with Journey to 9.0. Everybody in my team was wearing them because I wanted to reach 9 out of 10 in terms of customer satisfaction, and we were operating right when we launched our surveys probably around the high 6s or low 7s. And that's a huge improvement, but I really wanted everything focused on how do we delight customers. So in order to do that, we looked at the basic things such as hiring profile, is there work that's distracting from the agent in terms of engaging with the customer and really listening? So another thing we ended up building was something called the Universal Agent Desktop, because the situation I inherited was one where we had a bunch of different screens open. We were hunting and pecking, trying to find information. The FAQs weren't very clear. So I really developed this concept of voice of the agent to say, what's getting in the way of the agent having, quote unquote, an excuse to not perform extraordinary service for the customer? Is it the tools? Is it the information? And I wanted them not only to resolve customers' issues, but then raise their hand or provide a working group within the vendor to provide accountability, so that those excuses would be raised to my team. And then we had a service optimization team that says, how do you reduce contacts and how do we minimize kind of recurring issues that these guys have to tackle, but are very challenging for them because, quote unquote, they don't have control over them. The other thing I set up was ended up having two vendors or BPOs in Manila. So one actually was, to your point, was one that I had used, was one of the most successful ones I used, American Express. And the other one was really steeped in e-commerce and had a lot of other companies that were leading edge in the e-commerce space that they were serving as clients. And basically it's a champion challenger. So basically every time we did a hiring class, we would hire in the vendor that would have the best satisfaction. And oh, by the way, there's things such as, handle time and things, but the way I structured the kind of focus around an efficient experience was saying, our average customer at Beachbody is kind of a young mom. She might be 30 years old. And I would depict this depiction of like she has a mobile phone in one ear and she has like a fussy baby in the other. And she wants to get off the phone really quickly, wants her issue resolved. And therefore, I basically embedded this idea that efficient experience without callbacks or dial transfers is going to get you the satisfaction you need. And therefore, I didn't really have to spend a lot on the efficiency piece of it. But the Champion Challengers has worked really well. We did the same thing in India. We had one of my best partners from American Express, which I engaged in. And then we had a newer company. And that model has really worked. And we're very transparent also. We basically post all the results. We allow one vendor to see the other vendor's results, and they really know where they stack up. And that's worked really well.
Oh, that's great. So you kind of were bringing out improving customer satisfaction. And as you're starting to build out that service, I know that automation tends to come into play here. How do you leverage technology? Talk to me about how bringing in these vendors and bringing in and implementing these technologies, and how you talk to me how you manage to scale these processes.
Okay. Yeah. So it's interesting, throwing people at increasing contacts is a super short term. It's very expensive. And as I just mentioned, people don't necessarily want to be on the phone for 5 minutes just to change their flavor of Shakeology from strawberry to chocolate. So, but there was a fairly, as anybody is used to, there's a technology prioritization process, and there's levels on kind of CapEx investments, et cetera. So I kind of had to get in line for the technology stack in terms of I had a vision or roadmap for an extensive self-service end game, which we've actually achieved recently. But in the beginning, I was thinking, how do I take the most common simple transactions and at the very minimum, not have that person make a call? So my interim solution was create a form and have that a simple form that you fill out. Therefore, you can do it on your own time. It doesn't take a lot of time. You can have multiple requests on it. It gets sent to India. The person in India kind of data entry, types it all in, and does it manually, just like they were doing it over the phone. So basically, it takes the work off the back of the customer, puts it onto my team, and then what the India team, now we're flooded with a bunch of different forms. One of the nice things is that we can do them kind of overnight for people in the US and use the daytime staff in India. So that actually worked really well. But then they were like, okay, this is a lot of just manual, repetitive data entry. And therefore, we introduced things such as bots in terms of, providing a script that we could actually figure out how to do these repetitive motions with these different fields for these simple requests. And we actually negotiated a rate to say, there's an agent rate. And then we actually negotiated a blended rate to say, if you think 50% of the time you'll be able to use a bot, we could reduce that transaction cost significantly. And then that gives us a little bit more runway for us to develop the technology to say, and I was very honest with them. I said, ideally, you're going to be using these bots maybe for a year. So make sure that investment in that technology pays back fairly quickly, because my intent is to automate that at some time in the future, and that business will probably go away. And at the same time, the kind of what's in it for them was, I'll continue to drive more volume to you because my finance team is doing a lot of things onshore that are fairly repetitive. I'll give you that business. And there was some back office work, and we were launching new channels such as chat that also gave them more volume. So I felt like it was kind of a multi-layered step to try to insulate the customer from a lot of effort, and then over time drive the efficiency within Beachbody.
So that's really interesting because there's often a lot of balance between actually having to communicate, or a customer wants to talk to somebody, but like you said, somebody doesn't want to talk to somebody to change the flavor of their shake. So can you talk to me a little bit more, like how did you develop a process or identify those strategies to help those customers get better services?
Yeah, so I think kind of my philosophy around this is customers a lot of times don't know the most effective way to resolve their issue. And I'm not a huge fan of the concept of channel of choice. I'm more of a fan of, you tell me the easiest way to perform, my request A, and then lead me through that path. And we base that based on customer satisfaction data that says this is the most efficient, highest satisfactory way to accomplish this task. So kind of our strategy was, we built a support site, which had always existed because it was before basically a repository for FAQs. But we built a support site. We started making it super easy to get from either our streaming platform where you stream videos, our coach office, which is really what the distributors use to kind of manage their business, or the Team Beachbody website, which is the kind of e-commerce acquisition engine. All those different places, consistent place to go at the top right-hand corner that asks for support. We also started taking phone numbers, which were everywhere and everything, and said, we're going to put a URL, beachbodysupport.com. And then we provide kind of a flow, we call it. So you land on the page. It's kind of based, it's very similar, copyright infringement here, but to something like an Apple flow or whatever, support flow. So we looked at best practices across the industry on how people took people through a flow to make it super simple and super easy. Because we were afraid also people were saying it's too hard to contact an agent. So basically you land on, he says, what do you want to do? Here's a simple FAQ if you want to provide that. If there is a self-service option, it would provide that or one of these forms. And then lastly, if you do want to talk to an agent, here's a chat or a voice. And we would always provide a recommended option. So typically if it's self-service or a form, we would recommend that for an easy task. But if it was something about like disputing, where is my order? And if we didn't have clear information, or I want to process a return and it wasn't a simple process, we would recommend an agent. So it's just trying to gain the trust with our customers, especially the customers that were highly engaged and came often, to say, we got your back. We're going to take you down the path and resolve this easily. And many times it's a very simple answer that you can either do on your own versus talking to an agent. So that was kind of our philosophy. And then we could just measure the number of times that people actually accepted our recommendation, or if they didn't, we use something called Hotjar, which is a way to look at where people were ending up on the site by looking at their mouse history and clicks and where they were getting stuck. And then we knew we either needed to enhance the FAQ, make the self-service or the form easier in order for them to stop going through 3 or 4 clicks to get to an agent.
Okay. So that's really interesting. I really liked how you didn't prefer the customer's choice of preferred method of communication, and rather are guiding them as the preferred method, as in leading them on what you believe to be the best. And I think that's a very untraditional method that's probably worked out in your favor. So
yeah. The other thing, just to point out, the other thing which is a little challenging, back to the kind of the agent and vendor question, is And also when they did call, just because they had the number plugged into their phone and it's easier, whatever, and that's what they always done in the past, to actually have the agent then to say, I'm happy to handle this transaction for you, but you could do this online in 60 seconds or less, because it's basically them advertising, you don't have to call me, and therefore you're not generating revenue for this outsourced partner. So that's also a tricky one, is like, how do you incent an agent or an external partner to recommend self-service when that's going to decrease their revenue? So that was also a challenge. But then again, back to the champion challenger, the people that are doing what I want them to do and are helping us build their business and drive satisfaction and reduce costs are the ones I'm going to reward with more volume.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a good point. So it's on top of like recommending channels for them to engage with rather than having a choice, were there any other methodologies that you implemented that were a little outside the box?
Yeah, so I would say a couple. One is we had an email channel, which when we looked at the different channels, and the satisfaction of each was the lowest from a customer perspective, and not surprisingly, because there's a lot of back and forth, clarifying the question and having a follow-up question, and I feel like the culture in India and the Philippines tends to be one of like, I want to just double check, so I'm going to read back what you said to me, make sure I got everything correctly, which there's some sense because people get slapped on the hand for making an assumption or making an error. So it tend to be back and forth and back and forth. So there's a lot of time involved on both sides, and sometimes things would get lost in translation. So I decided to take the bold move and say, if we have a form, we have chat, we have voice, do we really need an email channel? And so I decided to close down the email channel. And before we did that, we checked in on some of our top customers, some of the heavy usage people from that channel, and said, why wouldn't, you should view chat as a more dynamic email channel that we have SLAs against in terms of response times, et cetera, and making sure there wasn't really anything that would stand in the way. So we decided to do that. And then we tend to have a very engaged community on social media. So we have a private Facebook group for our top customers. We do a lot of social monitoring, and we also make sure that when we do these tests, although I'm fairly bold at the tests, and I say, let's just do it, and then we can back out if it doesn't work, but I'm typically more about, if it doesn't work, let's tweak it and kind of, stick our neck out a little bit for a little bit of a short-term pain for a long-term gain. And so we just monitor feedback. Sometimes I even personally respond to our top customers about the rationale of why we're doing something. And many of them now know me because I'm fairly visible on social media and responding, and they know my background, and they know that, our CEO brought me in because of my expertise. And they're basically kind of open to being taught on how to be good customers, which it might be unique in an environment where we have a network marketing business and people are both selling our services on our behalf as well as our power users. And they have people that they're interacting with, that they're bringing into the business and helping them lose weight or get fit. So there's a lot of dialogue in terms of, this is for your own benefit, et cetera, which, a lot of companies don't have, but we attempt to teach our customers how to be better customers and to get better service by being open to doing things differently.
That's awesome. And yeah, getting rid of email, it's, I think is a fairly bold strategy, just to, not a lot of people will admit to that and are willing to commit to something like that. So I think that's awesome. But shifting over a little to the social media side, I know you mentioned that leveraging social media is like a big part of your program, and I'm sure a lot of the folks who engage with Beachbody love to post their insanity results on their social media. So it's a big platform for you guys to talk more about it. Can you talk a little bit more about what are some other ways that you've helped leverage a great experience using social media?
Sure. We have a site called we call it the VIP Facebook page. So we have about 300,000 coaches, which is our name for distributors, because there are people that introduce customers to our products, and then help them to see results. You just mentioned before and after pictures are a big way of saying, this was me, and through the help of the person that helped me kind of choose the right fitness program, choose the right nutritional supplements, and then kind of held my hand, provide recognition, held me accountable. Ultimately, unless people are really getting results, then the whole business model dries up. So because they're doing a lot of that, posting that on Instagram and Facebook, we decided to have a forum within that area, since people are already spending time there, both kind of selling and recognizing and promoting, where people could, we actually have two sites. One is really for best practice sharing and for recognition, and that's really managed by the sales and marketing team. And then we have a different site which says people are going to have either questions or concerns or challenges or things that are like, wait, why did you guys do this? Or what, a good example now is we have these shakes, and we have pre and post workout drinks, and everybody's super concerned about the ingredients. Is it GMO, and is it grass fed, and is it vegan, and all kind of stuff. But that can kind of bog down some of the inspirational side of the marketing sales page. So I created a page which we call the VIP Facebook page, which is really around if you have questions about something, and a lot of times it turns about complaints. So we launched a product even just last couple weeks ago around collagen, that is kind of just like a boost that you can throw into a shake or something out. It's tasteless and it provides some additional benefits. But people have questions about, why is this scoop smaller than the collagen I buy, currently from a different company? And, we go into a lot of that scientific. But in order for me, and my point here is, if someone posts a question and 100 other people have that question, I'd rather answer it publicly with an expert from like a scientist or someone from our nutrition team, as opposed to trying to train 500 agents to all answer it in their own way without as much expertise. So it drives kind of a better answer from a more qualified person and distributes that fairly widely. And then what we've also done is, a lot of times then people will have a follow-up question to be like, well, I have a specific question about my account. So recently we've launched Facebook Messenger, because not all things are appropriate to announce to the world. If you're saying, I didn't get the right level of commission for that sale last week, we now have an outlet where they can kind of still engage with us online. We can actually redirect them to a private message when appropriate, but it still keeps people engaged as a central place to go. They check there first. They might have a question, and even if they're not sure exactly if it pertains to a wide group of people or just to themselves, we can still keep them in that channel and provide. And Facebook Messenger, by the way, back to what I just said, I compared chat to email. Well, it's even better than chat now, because the biggest problem we have now with chat is people get distracted. They send a chat and they're multitasking, and we answer and we're sitting there waiting for them to respond. And we're like, we haven't heard back from you, so we're going to disconnect this chat. Whereas with Messenger, we can respond, we can do another message. And we're also hesitant about doing multiple chats, because we also don't want to be the people they're waiting for and get frustrated. So it's still interactive, but it's more like text. We ask a question, we check back in 15 minutes or half hour, we hope there's a response. And so that's also been a way we've leveraged social media, not only for kind of the public answers, but now for a kind of a familiar way that people are communicating as a new servicing channel.
Awesome. I think that's interesting. Can you expand a little bit more on like switching over to the Facebook chat and how that's better than just a regular chat?
Yeah, sure. So, well, first of all, we, as I said, we were experimenting on this just with our top customers. And so what I decided to do there was, like, even though we didn't have a system that could actually track that as a ticket to know how many tickets we're working and what's the resource requirement, I just told the workforce management team, I said, just take a couple people, take them out of the queue, and then we'll just kind of manually see like how busy they are, et cetera. Because I don't want to wait to saying we have to have this perfect kind of back end process to manage their productivity before we we launched this. And then we found it was working. So we've launched it now across all of our customers. But yeah, so the just to kind of reiterate what I said was, so with chat, we decided in the beginning we were going to do multiple chats, and then we got feedback that said, you guys aren't fast enough responding, or sometimes you kind of lose the train of thought because you're over here talking about somebody else, and I forget, oh yeah, what was I talking about over here? So it ended up being long chats, and it felt like fairly disconnected, and satisfaction wasn't great. So I kind of another, I guess, I don't know if it's a bold move, but I just said, you know what, only one chat at a time, because ideally it should probably take twice as long to do 2 chats, and you're going to have a better experience if I just sit there and wait for you. But the issue there is that, the productivity goes down. So the thing with, and I think because people are used to SMS text and people are used to messages now, again, back to this idea of teaching the customer, give us your question. If we need to do some research, instead of, feeling pressured to be like, oh, I better get back to this customer because I don't want this transaction to be more than 5 or 10 minutes. I'm gonna spend more time making sure if I need to double check with somebody or whatever, kind of do the homework, do the research, craft my answer, proofread it, because again, sometimes offshore agents aren't the best in terms of their grammar and typing skills. But kind of like you have all the excuses taken away to say this response is going to be really good. It might take a little bit longer, but you're not hanging and waiting for me to respond. You're just going to check back. So I think, again, you have to teach people a little bit, because there could be an urgent question, and that's why I haven't taken the bold move to say maybe we don't need chat anymore because everybody's on Facebook Messenger. But I do think it's it's more productive. You get a better response, and no one's waiting around, and you don't have like prematurely ended chats on either side because the person got distracted and couldn't respond fast enough.
Awesome. So out of everything we kind of talked about, I got one last question for you. Like from cutting out email, bringing in other vendors, maybe even switching over to Facebook chat over chat. Like, what were some of the challenges that you faced when bringing on these new strategies that were a little outside the box?
Yeah, to answer that, I think I'm going to introduce kind of one more thing that I think is probably one of the most challenging things that I did, and it kind of dips into the whole concept of, are you driving revenue for the organization? So kind of where our situation is right now is we've had incredible results in terms of, I think I've cut our support expenses by half, and we've doubled our net promoter score. So like I'm getting lots of feedback, but at the same time, our revenue has been fairly steady for the last couple of years, and we're trying to stimulate that. So I also want to do my part as an executive of the leadership team to say, what am I doing? And I come from a marketing background at American Express before I went into support. So the number one thing that I realized I could do to drive up satisfaction and reduce costs was, we ship out, I mentioned the Shakeology brand, which is our protein and nutrition shake that, again, has about 300,000 people who receive a bag of this that they make at home. And what happens is it's on continuity. So it's basically sent out every single month. Sometimes people don't realize it's going to be sent every month. Sometimes they don't realize, they forget, and all of a sudden there's a surprise charge on their card that they either can't afford that month, or they may have they may maybe not drinking it every day, and so they already have a bag in their pantry. So I basically made this pitch to say one of the biggest issues that customers have is they see a charge on their credit card, the bag's on its way, and they say, oh, can you stop that shipment because I don't really need it or can't afford it. And we say, whoops, sorry, it's already on the FedEx truck onto your house. So basically I had to build a case to say, I want to give people a notice 1 week in advance. You're going to ship next week, and give them the opportunity to go to our support site and update the flavor, the address, if they want to postpone. But of course, the risk there is the fact that they'll either postpone or cancel because we're reminding them, which is the kind of what subscription business is all about. So it was really a challenge in terms of how do I balance the fact that that would be a huge win for customers, and yet a potential decrease of revenue, not only for our company, but for these coaches that actually make money, make a commission off of these shipments to the people that they brought into the business. So I feel like it's a real balancing act between, providing a better customer experience at a more efficient, but it's still supporting the business needs. Because the other part of my role is engagement and loyalty and retention. And I had to prove that a short-term hit to a bag not being shipped was offset by the fact that this person felt comfortable that they were in control of their subscriptions. We warned them. They were comfortable recommending Beachbody to other people because we had their back. We provide them options. And if they decided to ignore that email, then it was really kind of more their fault than our fault trying to like push product on them that they didn't want. And so I feel like that's kind of the big challenge now is like, how do we avoid contacts, still provide an outlet for high touch service when necessary, but that's the big challenge is going back to my business partners in supply chain and technology and marketing and saying, how do we make sure that we think about all this stuff up front? We have a big user acceptance testing and QA process where like my team has to be the one that tests all your new stuff because I don't want big customers to one that kind of raise their hand and have to fix things. So I think that's probably kind of what I'd leave you with in terms of, the big challenge for me is drive revenue at the same time, but do it in a way that's above board and that customers are really going to understand why you're doing it and feel like it's right.
I love that. That great way to really focus on the customer and really make them feel good about leveraging your guys' product. So thank you for sharing that. And also we're going to wrap up. Thank you, Todd, for joining me and being my guest today. I really appreciate the time. Before send you guys off, is there anything else you'd like to add or say before let you go, maybe to the audience?
No, I think I really appreciate you giving me the time to explain it. It's kind of been really fun to be involved with a company that's really about trying to help people be successful. And we have this obesity epidemic, and we hope that we're providing kind of tools for people to get healthy. I love being in the support business because it's nice to have the obligation, I'll even call it, of solving customers' problems, making it easy to do business with, providing ways and insights into how the business can get better, and build its reputation. So it's been challenging, but it's been very fun. And I would say another piece of advice is, and it's easier in kind of this size company in this industry than it is in a large financial services company, but take risks, try things, as long as you have a sound rationale behind it and you really feel like you're doing it on behalf of the customer and you're reading the voice of the customer results. Kind of be bold and try things. And as long as you're monitoring feedback, I feel like I haven't really regretted a lot of the decisions that we've made, and they tend to work out in the long run. And even sometimes a setback can be a big learning experience that you can kind of build on in the future.
Well, you heard it from the expert here. So thanks for that, Todd. Appreciate it. I'm a big fan of Beachbody myself. I used to do that in P90X in high school. So this has been a very fun conversation, and thank you for your time, and thank you to all the viewers who are watching. My name is Anthony Koletsky, and this has been Outside In. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, Anthony.